You know that moment when your husband hands you divorce papers like he's returning a defective toaster to Target? Well, apparently my husband thought our 12-year marriage came with a satisfaction or your money-back guarantee. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout-out in our next video. Today's special shout-out goes to Claudia King from Dallas, Texas. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you my story. There I was, standing in our Westchester County kitchen last Friday afternoon, still wearing my courtroom blazer from a particularly brutal real estate closing when my darling husband of over a decade decided to drop his bombshell with all the finesse of a drunk frat boy at a wine tasting. "Elena, I need you to sign these," Rick announced, sliding a manila envelope across our granite countertop like he was dealing cards in Vegas. "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. Sophia's moving in this weekend, and she needs space for her meditation corner and essential oil collection." Sophia, his 28-year-old yoga instructor with the flexibility of a pretzel and apparently the moral backbone of overcooked spaghetti. I'd been watching this train wreck approach for months, but hearing it officially declared felt like getting slapped with a wet fish while someone played sad trombone music in the background. 48 hours, I repeated, opening the envelope with the kind of calm that makes emergency room nurses nervous. "That's generous of you, considering you've been planning this hostile takeover since July." Rick had the audacity to look surprised, like he'd just discovered water was wet. "You knew. Honey, you started going to yoga class 5 times a week and suddenly developed a passion for green smoothies. You're about as subtle as a marching band in a library." I flipped through the papers, my attorney brain automatically scanning for the usual amateur mistakes cheating husbands make when they think they're smarter than their lawyer wives. "Plus, you've been taking business trips to places that don't have business conferences. Sedona doesn't exactly scream Financial Advisory Summit, does it?" The beauty of being married to someone for 12 years is that you know exactly which buttons to push to make their left eye twitch. Rick's was doing a full CJ as he realized his master plan had more holes than a colander in a shooting gallery. "Look, Elena, don't make this difficult," he said, using that patronizing tone he'd perfected during our marriage counseling sessions. The ones he'd suggested right around the time Sophia started posting cryptic quotes about following your bliss on Instagram. "Sophia and I have found something real, something authentic. She understands my spiritual journey." I nearly choked on my coffee. Rick's idea of a spiritual journey was finding the motivation to separate his darks from his lights in the laundry. This was a man who thought chakras were a type of exotic cheese and believed meditation meant thinking about golf while sitting in traffic. "Your spiritual journey," I mused, setting down my mug with deliberate precision. "Is that what we're calling it when a middle-aged financial advisor gets seduced by a woman young enough to be carded at Applebee's? Don't be bitter, Elena. It's not attractive." "Bitter? Oh, sweetie. I hadn't even started warming up yet." See, Rick made one crucial miscalculation in his grand exit strategy. He assumed that 12 years of marriage had turned me into some suburban zombie who'd collapse into tears and beg him to reconsider. What he forgot was that I'm not just any lawyer. I'm a real estate attorney who specialized in property law. And more importantly, I'm the granddaughter of Margaret Maggie Torres, a woman who could find dirt on a saint and make them confess to jaywalking. Grandma Maggie, God rest her suspicious soul, had been a private investigator for 35 years before retiring to teach me the fine art of uncovering secrets. "Knowledge is power, Elena," she used to say while teaching me to research property records and background checks. "But knowing when to use it, that's wisdom." As Rick stood there looking pleased with himself, probably mentally calculating how much younger his new girlfriend made him feel, I was already 3 steps ahead. Because while he'd been busy having his midlife crisis, I'd been doing what any self-respecting attorney does when their marriage starts smelling fishier than low tide in August. I'd been gathering intelligence. "You're absolutely right, Rick," I said with a smile that would make a shark jealous. "Sophia does seem like quite the catch. Tell me, how did you two meet again?" "At the studio where she teaches those private sessions." His confidence faltered slightly, like a cell phone signal in a tunnel. "We connected on a deeper level. She sees the real me. The real him. Honey, I'd been living with the real him for 12 years. The real him left dirty socks on the bedroom floor, thought foreplay was asking if I was ready, and once got food poisoning from gas station sushi. But sure, let's pretend his 28-year-old yoga instructor discovered his hidden depths between downward dogs and credit card swipes. Well, I'm sure she does, I agreed, gathering the divorce papers with the kind of grace that comes from years of courtroom experience. In fact, I bet she sees the real you better than you think, along with the real Thomas Williams, the real Marcus Foster, and the real Jonathan Stone. The color drained from Rick's face faster than water from a broken bathtub. What are you talking about? Oh, nothing important, I said, heading toward the stairs with my papers. Just some light reading I've been doing. You know how I love a good mystery novel, especially ones with plot twists that make you question everything you thought you knew about the characters. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I could practically hear Rick's brain cells having a conference call trying to figure out what the hell I just said. The poor man probably thought I was bluffing, like when I used to threaten to hide his golf clubs if he didn't load the dishwasher properly. But unlike his pathetic attempts at household responsibility, this wasn't a negotiation. I closed the bedroom door and pulled out my laptop, the same one I'd been using for the past 3 weeks to conduct what Grandma Maggie would have called due diligence on a suspicious character. Because here's the thing about being a real estate attorney married to a financial advisor. We both know how to follow money trails, but only one of us inherited a grandmother who taught her how to follow people trails. It had started innocently enough back in late September when Rick came home smelling like sandalwood and spouting nonsense about opening his heart chakra. Normal wives might have assumed their 52-year-old husband was having a standard midlife crisis, but I'm not normal wives. I'm Elena Matthews, granddaughter of a woman who once caught a cheating spouse by tracking his dry cleaning habits for 6 months. The first red flag had been Sophia's social media presence. For someone supposedly dedicated to the simple life and spiritual minimalism, she had an awful lot of expensive yoga equipment and designer athleisure wear. Her Instagram was a carefully curated museum of inspirational quotes superimposed over photos of her doing complicated poses in locations that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But the real smoking gun had been her client testimonials page on her personal website. 4 glowing reviews from devoted students who'd apparently found life-changing transformation through her specialized private sessions. Thomas Williams, a cardiologist from Scarsdale. Marcus Foster, who owned 3 car dealerships in Connecticut. Jonathan Stone, a hedge fund manager from Greenwich. And my dear husband, Rick, financial advisor extraordinaire. The funny thing about rich married men having midlife crises. They're not nearly as original as they think they are. A little more digging, and by digging, I mean using the investigative skills Maggie had drilled into me since I was 12, revealed that Sophia Blake wasn't even Sophia Blake. Her real name was Sarah Chen, and she'd been working this particular yoga instructor meets spiritual guru angle for the past 3 years across Westchester and Fairfield counties. The woman was running a rotation system that would make a baseball manager proud. Mondays and Wednesdays with Thomas, whose wife thought he was getting cardiac rehabilitation after his heart attack. Tuesdays and Thursdays with Marcus, whose spouse believed he was attending grief counseling after losing his father. Fridays with Jonathan, who'd convinced his wife he was in intensive therapy for his trading addiction. And weekends. Well, weekends belonged to Rick, who'd somehow convinced himself he was special. Each man was funding a different aspect of her lifestyle. Thomas covered her Manhattan studio rental. The one she claimed was for advanced teacher training. Marcus was paying for her car lease on that white BMW she drove to their sessions. Jonathan funded her weekend retreats to sacred energy sites that coincidentally happened to be expensive spa resorts. And Rick. Sweet, gullible Rick was covering her rent on the apartment she kept as her meditation sanctuary. The most beautiful part of her con was how she'd convinced each of them that they were saving her from the others. Thomas thought he was rescuing her from an abusive ex-boyfriend. Marcus believed he was helping her escape crushing student debt. Jonathan was under the impression he was supporting her through a difficult family situation. And Rick thought he was her knight in shining armor, swooping in to save her from the financial struggles of being a misunderstood artist. I had to admire the craftsmanship, honestly. It was like watching a master chef prepare a 5-course meal of deception, complete with garnish. The documentation I'd gathered over the past 3 weeks read like a how-to manual for modern relationship fraud. Screenshots of text conversations she was having with all 4 men simultaneously, sometimes within minutes of each other. Financial records showing deposits from multiple sources into accounts under both her real and fake names. Even a detailed calendar system she kept for managing her rotation schedule, color-coded by which emotional manipulation technique worked best on each target. But here's where Sarah, made her fatal error. She got greedy. See, a smart con artist knows when to cut and run. But our girl had gotten so comfortable in her web of lies that she'd started making long-term plans, like convincing my husband to divorce me so she could move into our house. The house that, according to the property record she'd apparently never bothered to check, was owned by Matthews Property Holdings LLC, a company I'd established when we bought the place 8 years ago using my inheritance from Grandma Maggie. The same Grandma Maggie who taught me that the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with perfect documentation and a paper trail that would make the IRS weep with joy. As I sat there in our bedroom, listening to Rick pace around downstairs, probably trying to figure out how to explain this conversation to his precious Sophia, I opened my secure email account and began composing what would undoubtedly be the most satisfying group message of my entire legal career. Dear Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Foster, Mrs. Stone, and future ex-Mrs. Matthews, I typed, my fingers dancing across the keyboard like a pianist performing a particularly vicious concerto. I believe we have something in common, and I think it's time we had a conversation about Sophia Blake, also known as Sarah Chen, and the educational opportunities she's been providing our husbands. The beauty of having 4 different men's wives receive identical evidence packages at exactly the same time? Well, let's just say that chaos theory has nothing on a group of wealthy, well-connected women who've just discovered they've been played by the same amateur, our yoga instructor. I hit send on that group email at exactly 6:47 p.m. on Friday, October 13th, a timing I'm sure Grandma Maggie would have appreciated for its poetic justice. Within 15 minutes, my phone started buzzing like an angry hornet trapped in a coffee can. The first call came from Catherine Williams, Thomas's wife, whose voice had the kind of controlled fury that comes from 25 years of marriage to a cardiologist with wandering eyes. Mrs. Matthews, I received your email. Are you absolutely certain about these allegations? Mrs. Williams, I'm a real estate attorney. I don't make allegations. I present evidence. Check your email again. I've included timestamps, financial records, and enough photographic proof to convince a jury of skeptics. The second call was Diana Foster, Marcus's wife, who sounded like she was speaking through gritted teeth while possibly sharpening kitchen knives in the background. How long have you known about this Sophia person? 3 weeks of active investigation, but I've been watching the situation develop for about 6 weeks. Your husband's grief counseling sessions have a very interesting pattern, Mrs. Foster. By 7:30 p.m., I had Rebecca Stone on a 3-way call with the other 2 wives. And let me tell you, listening to 3 wealthy, intelligent women discover they'd been played by the same con artist was like attending a masterclass in coordinated fury. These weren't your average suburban housewives. Catherine was a former prosecutor who'd put away white-collar criminals for breakfast. Diana ran her own marketing firm and knew how to destroy reputations with surgical precision. Rebecca had an MBA from Wharton and connections that could freeze assets faster than liquid nitrogen. Sophia had picked the wrong group to mess with. Ladies, I said, settling into my desk chair with the satisfaction of a general addressing her troops, I propose we handle this situation with the kind of precision and thoroughness it deserves. Are you interested in a coordinated response? The enthusiasm in their voices could have powered the entire eastern seaboard. By 8 p.m., we had a group text chain that would make a Pentagon strategy team jealous. Catherine was handling the legal aspects. Apparently, Sophia's little operation constituted fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion across state lines. Diana was managing the social media investigation, tracking down every fake review and fabricated testimonial. Rebecca was following the money trail through banking records her hedge fund connections could access. And me. I was coordinating the whole beautiful symphony of justice while simultaneously preparing for Sophia's inevitable arrival at my house. Because that was the thing Rick didn't know about his precious spiritual guru. She had a key to our house that he'd given her 3 weeks ago. And according to the tracking app I'd discreetly installed on his phone, thank you, Grandma Maggie, for teaching me about digital surveillance, she was planning to surprise him with a celebration dinner tonight. At 8:45 p.m., Rick finally worked up the courage to come upstairs. I could hear him approaching like a guilty teenager trying to sneak past curfew. Each step on the stairs a symphony of regret and impending doom. Elena, are you okay up there? You've been awfully quiet. Just packing, sweetheart, I called back, not bothering to look up from my laptop where I was reviewing the insurance fraud documents Catherine had already started preparing. You know how thorough I am with important projects. About what you said earlier, those names. Oh, that. Don't worry about it, Rick. I'm sure it's nothing important. Just some coincidences I noticed while researching Sophia's background. You know how paranoid lawyers can be. I could practically hear his relief through the bedroom door. Poor Rick, thinking he'd dodged a bullet when he was actually standing in front of a cannon that hadn't fired yet. At 9:20 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Social media profiles deleted across all platforms as of 10 minutes ago. Someone's running scared. Rebecca chimed in at 9:25, bank accounts showing unusual activity. Large cash withdrawals started an hour ago. Catherine's message at 9:30 was my personal favorite, filed preliminary reports with fraud divisions in 3 counties. This is going to be fun. But the real entertainment started at 9:45 p.m. when I heard a car pull into our driveway. I glanced out the bedroom window to see Sophia's white BMW, the one Marcus Foster was paying for, parking behind Rick's Mercedes. She bounced out carrying what looked like takeout bags from that expensive organic place in town, wearing yoga pants that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget and a smile that could sell ice to penguins. I quickly texted the group, the star of our show has arrived. Ladies, are you ready for the grand finale? 3 immediate responses. Ready. Let's do this. Time to end this charade. From downstairs, I heard the front door open and Sophia's voice calling out in that breathy, pseudo-mystical tone she probably practiced in the mirror. Rick, honey, I brought dinner. I thought we could celebrate your new freedom with some organic quinoa Buddha bowls. Buddha bowls. Of course. Because nothing says I'm going to destroy your marriage and steal your house quite like appropriating Eastern philosophy and serving it with overpriced grain salads. I heard Rick practically tumbling down the stairs to greet her, his voice filled with the kind of guilty enthusiasm of a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar who's trying to convince everyone he was just checking if the cookies were fresh. Sophia, I told you to wait until tomorrow. She's still here. Oh, don't worry about that, came Sophia's confident reply. After tomorrow, this will all be behind us. We can start fresh in our beautiful new home. Our beautiful new home. The audacity was almost admirable. Almost. I closed my laptop, straightened my blazer, and checked my appearance in the mirror. Time to go downstairs and introduce Sophia to the concept of consequences. But first, one final text to my new favorite group chat. Showtime, ladies. Hope you're recording this. I descended those stairs like I was walking into a courtroom where I already knew the verdict. Sophia and Rick were in the kitchen, her arms wrapped around his waist while she gazed adoringly at our granite countertops like she was already redecorating in her mind. The takeout containers were spread across the island, and she'd even lit some candles, probably the expensive ones I'd bought from that boutique in Greenwich. Well, I announced, my voice cutting through their romantic bubble like a knife through warm butter. Sophia Blake. Or should I say, Sarah Chen. The effect was instantaneous and absolutely delicious. Sophia's face went through more color changes than a traffic light having a nervous breakdown, while Rick looked like someone had just told him his 401k had been invested in Monopoly money. Elena, what are you talking about? Rick stammered. But Sophia had gone completely rigid, her hands dropping from his waist like she'd just realized she was hugging a rattlesnake. Oh, I think Sophia knows exactly what I'm talking about, I said, pulling out my phone and setting it on the counter. In fact, I bet she's checking her messages right about now, wondering why Thomas Williams' wife, Marcus Foster's wife, and Rebecca Stone's wife have all been trying to reach her for the past hour. Sophia's phone, which had been buzzing incessantly from her purse, suddenly seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. She stared at it like it might explode, which, considering the circumstances, wasn't far from the truth. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Elena," she said, but her voice had lost that breathy, mystical quality faster than air from a punctured balloon. "But Rick told me you might try to cause trouble." "Trouble?" I laughed, the sound echoing through our kitchen like a gunshot. "Honey, I haven't even started causing trouble yet. That was just the opening act." My phone rang at exactly 10:05 p.m. I answered it on speaker because if you're going to destroy someone's life, you might as well do it with theatrical flair. "Elena, it's Catherine Williams. I'm here with Diana and Rebecca. We've just finished filing reports with the Fraud Division, the IRS, and the State Attorney General's office. We thought Sophia might want to know." Sophia's face had progressed from pale to green, landing somewhere around the color of old guacamole. Rick was looking between us like a spectator at the world's most confusing tennis match. "What Fraud Division?" he asked, his voice cracking like a 13-year-old boy hitting puberty. "Well, Rick," Diana Foster's voice came through the speaker with the kind of professional cheerfulness she probably used to deliver bad news to clients. "Your girlfriend has been running quite the operation. 4 married men, 4 different stories, 4 different revenue streams. Very entrepreneurial, really." "For men," Rick repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca Stone's voice joined in, crisp and matter-of-fact. Thomas thought he was helping her escape an abusive relationship. Marcus believed he was covering her student loans. "You thought you were supporting her through financial hardship. My husband Jonathan was convinced he was funding her spiritual retreat to heal from family trauma. She's been collecting rent money, car payments, studio fees, and vacation funds from all of you simultaneously." The sound Rick made was somewhere between a wounded animal and a broken garbage disposal. Sophia, meanwhile, had grabbed her purse and was edging toward the door like a shoplifter who'd just spotted security. "Sophia," I called sweetly, stopping her mid-escape. "Before you go, there's one more thing you should know. This house, the one you've been planning to move into, it's owned by Matthews Property Holdings LLC. My LLC, bought with my inheritance, in my name, with my money. Rick's name isn't on the deed, the mortgage, or any of the legal documents." She turned around slowly, her face now resembling a wax figure that had been left too close to a heater. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means," I said, savoring every word like fine wine, "that even if Rick divorces me, he has no legal claim to this property. You've been planning to move into a house that he can't give you because he doesn't own it. You've been seducing a man for his assets when his primary asset legally belongs to his wife." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming and the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the seconds until Sophia's world completely imploded. Rick finally found his voice. "For men? You've been seeing for men." Sophia's carefully constructed mystical persona crumbled faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. "Rick, I can explain." "Explain," he exploded, his face turning red enough to stop traffic. "Explain how you've been playing me for months. Explain how everything you told me was a lie." "Actually," Catherine's voice cut through the chaos from my phone, "she won't be explaining anything to anyone except federal investigators. We've traced financial transactions across state lines, documented identity fraud, and found evidence of tax evasion that would make Al Capone impressed. Sophia, or Sarah, or whatever your real name is, you're about to become very familiar with the inside of a courtroom." Sophia made one last desperate play. "Rick, honey, none of this matters. We have something special." "Special?" Diana's voice dripped with sarcasm. "You mean like the special relationship you had with my husband every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months?" That's when Sophia finally cracked completely. The tears started flowing, the mystical facade disappeared entirely, and she began babbling about how she never meant for it to go this far, how she just needed money for her sick mother, how she was going to tell everyone the truth eventually. But I was done listening. I'd heard enough lies from Sophia to last several lifetimes. "Ladies," I said into the phone, I think our work here is finished. Sophia, the door is behind you. I suggest you use it before I decide to press additional charges for trespassing. Sophia fled our house faster than a tourist leaving Times Square on New Year's Eve, her designer yoga pants and spiritual enlightenment retreating into the October night like smoke from an extinguished candle. The white BMW, Marcus's BMW, technically, squealed out of our driveway with all the grace of a shopping cart with a broken wheel. Rick stood in our kitchen looking like someone had just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance. The Buddha bowls sat congealing on the counter, their organic quinoa probably wondering how it had gotten mixed up in such a mess. 12 years, Elena, he said finally, his voice hollow as a campaign promise. 12 years of marriage, and you knew about this for weeks and didn't say anything. Oh, sweetheart, I replied, blowing out Sophia's candles with deliberate ceremony. I learned a long time ago that knowledge is only powerful when you know exactly how to use it. Grandma Maggie always said, timing is everything in both revenge and real estate. The beautiful thing about watching someone's fantasy implode is the moment they realize they've traded something real for something completely fabricated. Rick had given up a marriage with a successful attorney who owned prime Westchester County real estate for a con artist who'd been juggling more men than a circus performer. My phone buzzed with updates from my new favorite group chat. Catherine had already spoken with a federal prosecutor who was very interested in Sophia's multi-state operation. Diana had discovered 2 additional victims in Connecticut through her social media investigation. Rebecca had traced enough financial irregularities to keep forensic accountants busy for months. The IRS is going to have a field day with this, I told Rick, scrolling through the evidence files. Turns out Sophia hasn't been reporting income from her various spiritual counseling services. Amazing how quickly enlightenment disappears when tax fraud charges start flying. By Saturday morning, the consequences were spreading through our social circles like gossip at a country club board meeting. Thomas Williams' medical practice was scrambling to do damage control after Catherine leaked the story to her former colleagues in the prosecutor's office. Marcus Foster's car dealerships were facing awkward questions from clients who'd heard about his grief counseling sessions. Jonathan Stone had quietly taken a leave of absence from his hedge fund while Rebecca consulted divorce attorneys. And Rick. Poor Rick discovered that being the fourth wheel in a con artist's rotation isn't exactly a resume booster in the financial advisory world. Word travels fast in Westchester County, especially when it involves yoga instructors, fraud investigations, and very angry wives with very good lawyers. The divorce papers Rick had so confidently served me turned out to be as worthless as Sophia's promises of spiritual transformation. When you don't actually own the primary marital asset, divorce negotiations become significantly more complicated. Turns out my inheritance-funded LLC and my name on every legal document gave me negotiating power that made Rick's position about as strong as a house of cards in a hurricane. But the real satisfaction came from watching the domino effect ripple through Sophia's carefully constructed empire. Within a week, Thomas Williams was facing a medical board inquiry about his cardiac rehabilitation expenditures. His colleagues at the hospital had started asking uncomfortable questions about why a cardiologist needed 6 months of private yoga therapy to recover from a minor heart episode. Marcus Foster's wife Diana had taken their story to the local news, spinning it into a cautionary tale about middle-aged men falling victim to elaborate romance scams. His dealerships became the subject of uncomfortable jokes, with local radio hosts making cracks about cars being sold by men who couldn't tell the difference between grief counseling and being conned by a yoga instructor. Jonathan Stone's situation was perhaps the most devastating. The hedge fund world doesn't tolerate scandal well, and news of his spiritual retreat funding arrangement made him unemployable in his field. Rebecca's Wharton connections ensured that everyone in their social circle knew exactly how gullible her husband had been. And Rick learned that being exposed as the fourth victim in a romance scam doesn't do wonders for your credibility as a financial advisor. Clients started asking uncomfortable questions about his judgment. How could a man who advised others about financial security be so easily fooled by a woman running a basic con game? 3 months later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen where this whole drama unfolded, but now it's just me, my coffee, and the satisfaction that comes from watching karma work with the precision of a Swiss watch. The house is mine, the peace is mine, and the future is entirely mine to design. Catherine, Diana, Rebecca, and I still maintain our group chat, though now it's mostly for sharing wine recommendations and legal updates on Sophia's case. She's currently facing charges in 3 states and owes back taxes that would make a lottery winner nervous. The yoga instructor who promised spiritual enlightenment is about to discover the meditative qualities of federal prison. The investigation had uncovered even more than we initially suspected. Sophia, Sarah Chen, had been running variations of this scam for nearly 5 years across multiple states. Our 4 husbands were just her most recent rotation. Previous victims included a judge in Connecticut, several doctors, and even a small-town mayor who'd thought he was funding her non-profit yoga initiative for underprivileged children. The federal prosecutor Catherine had connected us with called it one of the most sophisticated romance fraud cases they'd seen. Sophia had created multiple identities, maintained detailed psychological profiles of her targets, and even hired actors to play supporting roles in her various sob stories. The sick mother, the abusive ex-boyfriend, the family trauma, all carefully crafted lies designed to trigger the protective instincts of wealthy, middle-aged men going through vulnerable periods. Rick moved into a studio apartment in White Plains, where he's apparently trying to rebuild his client base and his dignity simultaneously. Last I heard, he'd sworn off yoga entirely and was considering taking up golf, a sport where the only thing that gets twisted is your swing. The irony wasn't lost on me that a man who'd spent years advising clients about protecting their assets had been so easily manipulated into giving away his own. But that's the thing about midlife crises. They make smart people do incredibly stupid things. The most beautiful part of this whole mess. I didn't have to destroy anyone's life. I just had to reveal the truth and let consequences handle the rest. Sophia destroyed her own life by building it on lies. Rick destroyed his own marriage by choosing fantasy over reality. The other men destroyed their own relationships by falling for the same tired manipulation tactics. I just provided the documentation. Grandma Maggie always said that justice isn't about revenge, it's about restoring balance to the universe. Sometimes that balance requires a little help from well-organized evidence files and a group of very determined wives with excellent lawyers. The legal proceedings continued for months. Sophia eventually pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. She was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution that would keep her in debt for the rest of her life. The judge, coincidentally a woman, made a point of noting that the defendant had shown particular cruelty in targeting men during vulnerable periods in their lives and marriages. During the sentencing hearing, I watched from the gallery as Sophia, now wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of designer yoga wear, stood before the judge. Gone was the breathy, mystical persona. Gone were the flowing scarves and crystal jewelry. What remained was a 30-something con artist who'd finally run out of marks and lies. The other wives were there too, of course. Catherine had helped build the prosecution's case. Diana had documented every fake social media post and fabricated testimonial. Rebecca had traced the money trail through offshore accounts and shell companies. We'd become an unlikely team, united by our shared experience of having husbands who'd fallen for the same elaborate con. When it was over, we went for drinks at a wine bar in White Plains. Not to celebrate. There was nothing celebratory about watching marriages implode and families fall apart, but to acknowledge what we'd accomplished together. You know what's funny? Catherine said, swirling her Pinot Noir thoughtfully. If our husbands had just been honest about their midlife crises, we probably would have been understanding. Marriage counseling, maybe some time apart, working through whatever they were feeling. But the lying, the deception, the sheer stupidity of falling for such an obvious scam. It's the betrayal that's unforgivable, Diana agreed. Not just cheating, but being so easily manipulated. How do you trust someone's judgment after they've demonstrated such spectacularly poor decision-making? Rebecca nodded, raising her glass. To Elena, for having the intelligence to see through the scam and the backbone to do something about it. And to Grandma Maggie, who taught her that knowledge is only powerful when you know how to use it. We toasted to justice served, lessons learned, and futures that belonged entirely to us. These days, when people ask me about my divorce, I just smile and say it was educational. I learned that 12 years of marriage taught me exactly how much I'm worth, and it's significantly more than I'd been settling for. The house feels different now, lighter somehow, without the weight of lies and deception filling the rooms. I've converted Rick's home office into a library, complete with comfortable reading chairs and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Grandma Maggie's investigative textbooks have a place of honor on the top shelf, right next to my law school case studies. I still practice real estate law, but I've added a new specialty, helping other women navigate divorce proceedings when fraud is involved. Word of mouth from Catherine, Diana, and Rebecca has brought me clients who found themselves in similar situations, discovering that their husbands weren't just cheating, but being systematically conned by professional manipulators. It's amazing how often these cases crop up. Middle-aged men with disposable income seem to be particularly susceptible to spiritual guru romance scams. I've handled cases involving fake art dealers, phony charity workers, and even a woman who convinced 3 different men that she was a deposed foreign princess in need of financial assistance to reclaim her rightful throne. The key to handling these situations, I've learned, is patience and thorough documentation. Emotional reactions, while understandable, aren't nearly as effective as cold, hard evidence presented at exactly the right moment. Grandma Maggie's lessons about timing and precision have served me well in this new chapter of my career. And if any future suitors think they can play games with Elena Matthews, well, let's just say I've got Grandma Maggie's investigative skills, a law degree, and 3 new friends who know exactly how to coordinate a beautiful takedown. After all, karma might be patient, but it's got excellent credit and always collects with interest. The funny thing about surviving something like this is how much stronger it makes you. Not in some inspirational poster kind of way, but in a practical, real-world sense. When you've successfully exposed a multi-state fraud operation and coordinated the downfall of a professional con artist, everyday problems start to seem manageable. Difficult clients at work. Please. I've dealt with federal prosecutors and IRS investigators. A cranky real estate agent is child's play. Car trouble. I once tracked a con artist across 3 states using nothing but social media posts and financial records. I can handle a mechanic trying to oversell me on unnecessary repairs. The confidence that comes from knowing you can protect yourself, that you can see through lies and manipulation, that you have the skills to fight back when necessary, that's worth more than any marriage built on deception and false premises. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd confronted Rick directly when I first suspected he was cheating. Would he have ended the affair? Would we have gone to counseling and worked things out? Would our marriage have survived? But then I remember the divorce papers he served me with such callous confidence, the way he gave me 48 hours to pack up 12 years of my life so his girlfriend could move in. I remember how easily he was manipulated, how readily he believed Sophia's lies, how willing he was to throw away everything we'd built together for a woman who was simultaneously conning 3 other men. That's not the kind of judgment you recover from. That's not the kind of betrayal you forgive and forget. And frankly, that's not the kind of man I want to spend the rest of my life with. The Rick I married 12 years ago, or at least the Rick I thought I married, would never have fallen for such an obvious scam. He would have been suspicious of a young woman who needed financial help from multiple older men. He would have asked questions, done research, protected not just himself but our marriage and our future. But somewhere along the way, that Rick disappeared. Maybe he never existed at all. Maybe I'd been married to a man who was always susceptible to flattery and manipulation, and it just took the right con artist to expose his weaknesses. Either way, I'm better off without him. The house is quieter now, but it's a peaceful quiet rather than the tense silence that had been building for months before everything exploded. I wake up in the morning without wondering what lies Rick will tell me that day. I come home from work without bracing myself for another evening of fake spiritual enlightenment nonsense. I've started dating again, cautiously. The advantage of being a woman in her 50s who's just survived an elaborate fraud investigation is that I have very little patience for games or deception. I can spot a lie from 3 counties away, and I'm not afraid to ask hard questions early in relationships. It's funny how much more attractive honesty becomes when you've lived through the alternative. My social life has improved dramatically too. Catherine, Diana, Rebecca, and I have become genuine friends, bonding over shared experience and mutual respect for each other's strength. We have dinner once a month, take weekend trips together, and serve as each other's sounding boards for everything from career decisions to dating advice. We call ourselves the Fraud Squad, though never in public. It's our little inside joke, a reminder of how we met and what we accomplished together. We've even helped other women in similar situations, creating an informal network of support for wives who discover their husbands have been victimized by romance scams. Because here's what I learned from this whole experience. These scams are more common than anyone wants to admit. Professional con artists like Sophia and Sarah target vulnerable men with surgical precision. They study their marks, exploit their insecurities, and create elaborate fantasy relationships designed to extract maximum financial benefit. And the victims, both the men who fall for it and the wives who have to deal with the aftermath, often suffer in silence because of shame and embarrassment. Who wants to admit their husband was stupid enough to be conned by a yoga instructor? Who wants to publicly acknowledge that their marriage ended because their spouse got seduced by such an obvious fraud? But shame and silence just enable these predators to keep operating. By speaking openly about what happened, by sharing our story with others, we help prevent future victims and support current ones. I've even considered writing a book about the experience. The Yoga Instructor's Con: How 4 Wives Exposed a Multi-State Romance Scam has a nice ring to it, don't you think? My publisher friends tell me there's a growing market for true crime stories, especially ones where the women are the heroes rather than the victims. The legal aftermath continued for almost 2 years. Sophia's case became something of a landmark in romance fraud prosecution, partly because of the meticulous documentation we provided and partly because of the coordination between multiple jurisdictions. Law enforcement agencies started using our case as a training example for identifying and investigating similar scams. The financial recovery was more complicated. While Sophia was ordered to pay restitution, most of the money was already spent on her lifestyle. The men had funded everything from luxury vacations to designer clothes to expensive spa treatments. You can't exactly repossess a weekend in the Hamptons or return used yoga equipment. But that wasn't really the point. The point was justice, accountability, and making sure Sophia couldn't run the same con on other families. Rick's financial advisor practice never really recovered from the scandal. It's hard to market yourself as a trusted financial expert when local news stories detail how easily you were manipulated by a con artist. He eventually moved to Florida, where he's working for someone else's firm and presumably keeping a much lower profile. I heard through mutual friends that he tried dating for a while but couldn't maintain any serious relationships. Apparently, he'd become paranoid and suspicious, unable to trust his own judgment about women's motives. The irony is almost perfect. The man who was too trusting became unable to trust at all. Thomas Williams retired early from his medical practice. The stress of the investigation, combined with his wife Catherine's decision to divorce him, led to health problems that made continuing his cardiology career impossible. He now lives alone in a small condo in Westchester, seeing his children on scheduled weekends and holidays. Marcus Foster managed to keep his car dealerships, but his marriage to Diana didn't survive. She'd been willing to work through the infidelity, but not the stupidity. As she put it during their divorce proceedings, "I can forgive a moment of weakness, but I can't respect a complete lack of judgment." Jonathan Stone's hedge fund career ended permanently. The financial industry has zero tolerance for scandal, and being exposed as the victim of a romance scam, especially one involving fake spiritual retreats, made him unemployable in his field. Rebecca took him for everything she could legally claim in their divorce, then moved to California to start fresh. Of all the marriages affected by Sophia's con, none survived intact. The lies and deception were just too extensive, the betrayal too complete. But interestingly, all 4 of us wives emerged stronger and more independent than we'd been before. Catherine returned to prosecution, specializing in white-collar crime. She's become something of an expert on romance scams and frequently consults with law enforcement agencies on similar cases. Diana expanded her marketing firm and now runs one of the most successful agencies in Westchester County. She says the experience of investigating Sophia's fake social media presence gave her insights into digital manipulation that she uses to help her clients build authentic online brands. Rebecca used her divorce settlement to start an investment consulting firm for women. She helps other divorcees understand their financial options and protect their assets during marital transitions. And me. I've built a thriving practice helping women navigate complex divorces involving fraud. I've handled cases involving fake businesses, hidden assets, offshore accounts, and various types of romantic deception. Grandma Maggie's investigative techniques, combined with modern digital forensics, have made me very good at uncovering financial lies. I've also started teaching seminars at the local community college, protecting yourself from financial fraud in relationships. The classes are always full, mostly with women who've heard whispered stories about romance scams and want to know how to protect themselves and their families. The most rewarding part of my work now is helping other women realize they're stronger than they think. So many of them come to me feeling helpless and betrayed, convinced they're victims of circumstances beyond their control. But when I show them how to gather evidence, how to follow money trails, how to use the legal system to protect their interests, they discover they have more power than they ever imagined. It's what Grandma Maggie always taught me. Knowledge is power, but only if you know how to use it wisely. 5 years later, I'm sitting in my home office, the one that used to be Rick's before I converted it into my investigative headquarters, reviewing files for my latest case. Another romance scam, this one involving a fake art dealer who convinced 3 different men that she needed money to purchase undervalued masterpieces for a private collection. The pattern is always the same: attractive woman, sob story, wealthy middle-aged men looking for meaning and excitement in their lives. The details change, but the underlying psychology remains constant. My phone rings. It's another attorney, referring a client whose husband disappeared with their savings after falling for an online romance scam. The woman is devastated, convinced she'll never recover financially or emotionally. Don't worry, I tell her, opening a new case file on my computer. We're going to get through this together. And by the time we're done, you're going to know exactly what you're worth. Because that's the thing about surviving something like this. You learn that you're much more resilient than you ever imagined. You discover strengths you didn't know you had. You realize that being underestimated by people who think they're smarter than you is actually a tremendous advantage. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very careful, you get the chance to turn that advantage into justice. The sunset streaming through my office window catches the frame containing Grandma Maggie's last letter to me, the one I found after she passed away. Elena, it reads in her careful handwriting, remember that the best investigators aren't the ones who find the most secrets. They're the ones who know exactly when and how to reveal them. Timing is everything, patience is a virtue, and the truth always wins in the end. Use what I taught you wisely, and never let anyone make you feel small. Love, Grandma Maggie. I touch the frame gently, then turn back to my computer to start planning another investigation. Somewhere out there, another con artist is running another scam, counting on shame and silence to protect them from consequences. They picked the wrong neighborhood to work in. After all, karma might be patient, but in Westchester County, it has excellent legal representation and a very thorough understanding of fraud law. And if that's not justice, it's close enough for me.